Hi, this is JJ DiGeronimo, the president of Tech Savvy Women, and I am so thrilled to have Mala Kumar with us today. I actually ran across Mala in a fantastic article which was posted on TechCrunch just last month. So I would like to welcome Mala, talk about her career in tech, and specifically about some of the words of advice and programs she's working on to advance women in tech. Hello, Mala. Tell us a little bit about your work.
Hi, thanks for having me. By trade, I'm in international development, so that's essentially poverty reduction, economic empowerment, strengthening governing systems across the world. I've worked with a couple of agencies of the United Nations, including UNICEF and the UN World Food Program, both here in New York City and in sub-Saharan Africa. And specifically within development, I focus on technology for development, which the acronym is known as ICT for D. So we're really looking at how technology solutions can better existing development platforms in the field.
That is fantastic. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that as it relates, because there's a lot of women in tech savvy women that want to use technology for the better good and they don't know how to get integrated. So if there's women listening in that want to learn more about you or more about the programs, where should they turn to?
And then there's a lot of websites out there that focus on how individual contractors can engage with different development organizations, not just the UN, but major NGOs like the International Red Cross or the International Rescue Committee, which focuses on refugees, is very critical right now. And I'd be happy to forward along some websites if you'd like to post them, because we're always looking for people that are technically minded, and especially women.
We will surely post that in the description. That would be fantastic. So let's jump into this article. Your article, I think I found it in a Google alert that was sent my way, and I just was, the title was so fantastic because there's so many people talking about diversity and how do we get more diverse candidates and how do we create more diverse teams for thought diversity and to benefit businesses. But your title is Diversity in Technology Needs Less Buzz and More Action. Can you talk a little bit about your article?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not going to name the company that it came out of, but I had been engaging with this one company in New York, headquartered in New York, for a few months, and they wanted me to come in, talk to them for an internal networking event about how my experience could translate to what they do. Everything sounded great, and then I get an email back saying that I don't meet the basic requirements, and I found out through a contact that it was actually because I didn't have a specific skill set, which I found ridiculous because, as I mentioned in the article, not just by women, but anybody who's a person of color from a lower disadvantaged background, we just go through things that nobody else can possibly understand. These are things that can only be experienced and often cannot quantify them, so you can't even send a statistic to somebody to try to enumerate what it means. So for me to be forced out of that field, when I have those skills, things that come through experience, but I don't have a certain programming language or I haven't worked on I find that ridiculous because those are things that really can be taught. So I wanted to write an article, and I've done this quite a few times in what I call narrative nonfiction. So as a storyline, as an arc that people can really relate to and say, I empathize. I see aspects of myself in what you said. I feel like it shares really well, and it really resonates with a lot of people. And it does it in a way that's not as aggressive or obtrusive as throwing in 100 numbers and statistics, which I do all the time for my work. I think a storyline really hits that point in ways that numbers often cannot.
Well, I thought it was fantastic, and I think it gives a realistic view on what's really happening. I have recruiters call me almost every week looking for a skill set or a type of person or a combination of two. So now with this perspective, what type of advice would you give recruiters or people, hiring managers, looking to build diverse teams but not finding the candidates or not finding the right candidates?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of very obvious advice that I think has been written about a lot. So definitely don't go by the buzzwords that people have. Don't put job descriptions that are completely irrelevant or just, as it's referred to in the tech industry, as a purple unicorn. TechCrunch actually had an article about that. There's no such thing as a perfect candidate. We all know that. There's a lot of subjective factors to that. So just be realistic about that. And I know there's legal issues involved, but try to give actual feedback to people. Perhaps they have the right skills and they're not presenting it the correct way according to the company's philosophy. And I think one thing that's just not talked about a lot, and I do plan on writing about this, is just to message things differently within the own company, inherently internally to the own company, I'm also an internationally recognized published novelist. My first novel has been recognized all around the world. I've been on the front page of The Advocate, now TechCrunch, USA Today. I've had a lot of media coverage. I know how to write a constructive article, but no matter how well I lay this out, I always get some ridiculous backlash. And it's often from, I have to say it, white men in the tech industry themselves. So there's clearly this whole idea of us versus them. Like, we're not coming to steal your jobs. We're not telling you that after 20 years of valued service, you're going to be kicked out because of some woman who's unqualified. What we're saying is that the way that the world is working now, with the Internet of Things, with economically emerging markets, we just need a more diverse workforce. It's in everybody's compelling interest. So I think if diversity initiatives within companies emphasize that point, that this is not charity, this is not doling out jobs for no reason, this is in the interest of every person in this company, I think that that backlash will at least be somewhat mitigated. There's always going to be sexist people, there's always going to be homophobes, there's always going to be racists. We can't deal with, there's no way to get around that. But I do think that there's a lot of backlash from people within the industry because they just feel threatened by this idea of somebody unqualified coming in and taking their job. So I think a lot of it, honestly, is internal to the culture of companies, and that's not talked about nearly enough.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, just two thoughts on your points, which all were fantastic. Is, I've sat in an interview before where they've basically told me they were looking for a unicorn. And at the time, it just caught me so off guard because it really wasn't in the press as it is now. But now having retrospect on that conversation, to me, it really talks about really not understanding the role itself and what you're looking to get out of it, and not understanding transferable skills. I think if you have a team and you're trying to fill different roles, you have to think outside the box. You cannot map acronyms, as you mentioned, and you have to understand, how can I take someone who's done this and convert them to do this? And I think that takes time. That takes confidence in your own ability and trust in what people have to offer. And I think with the pace of technology in these companies, I think people just want the easy yes.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I don't want to call it laziness, but I do think there's an inherent inability to look beyond what's explicitly written on anything, on a resume, on a website, on whatever. And having worked all around the world in all kinds of situations, from conflict zones to post-conflict zones to the middle of Manhattan, I had a great office overlooking the World Trade Center for 2 years, to the middle of sub-Saharan Africa, I can tell you that these things are not so evident. But for whatever reason, companies, I don't know whether it's systematic or whether it's just the way that recruiters are trained or diversity initiatives are put through these companies, there just seems to be a very clear lack of knowledge of what actually constitutes at the base of these jobs. And I wrote about it in my article as well. I went to an undergrad that's really well known for engineering, got some really amazing programs, but I knew it was very racist and homophobic, and I knew that it was also just very sexist. There's very few women in the program overall, and I had math scores and test scores that were way above average than a lot of the people there. But I knew that once I went into those environments, I would just have to be so outstandingly better than everybody else because I don't have that support and I don't get that automatic recognition for something. So there's a lot of factors that go in, and I think the way that a lot of companies are now looking at, and there's some really great initiatives that focus on urban youth, that focus on young girls, and that's amazing. That's going to do a lot of good in future generations. But I'm only 30 years old. I'm not dead. I've got a lot of years left to work. So why can't we have some kind of initiative where you invest in me and I give you the next 2 to 3 decades of my hard work?
I really commend you on bringing this forward. I think for so many of us that are really in the trenches, that these types of voices are so important. And to be honest, I think it does. I think this type of bias and stereotypic behavior happens as early as college, especially in these engineering and computer science programs. I know I was one of just a handful of women across the entire 4 years. And I have to say, I haven't met many women in the industry that don't deliver above and beyond their expectations because we've had to. And so engaging more women in the process, promoting more women, I honestly think they really have been delivering for years, and they're a pretty sure bet. So I agree with you. I think there needs to be more action and comfort and confidence that diversity does not mean as you refer to, taking over your job or creating additional competition. It's cooperation, collaboration, and being able to reach the goals that are ahead of us with this Internet of Things.
Absolutely. Not only with the Internet of Things, but also, as I said, with economically emerging markets. So, again, I'm in international development, and you would be amazed at how many solutions can really better education or poverty reduction or world hunger. There's a lot of really big issues that we need to tackle, but we have so much focus and so much media saturation, so much corporate saturation on the same retail, commerce, big banking solutions. And yes, there are some problems that can be addressed with that, but the number of companies that are going after just those very small bits of the entire technology sphere is amazing to me. Like I sometimes I get overwhelmed by the number of startups that are focused on delivering you food. So if we can also start to shift a little bit more to big social issues, I do think across the board, whether it's in terms of gender or sex or race or sexual orientation, you're going to get, just by nature of the work, a lot of very people really care about these issues, and a lot of people who care about these issues are a product of marginalized societies or felt on the fringe of where they grew up. So it stands to reason that if we shift even just a segment of everything that we devote into advertising and retail and commerce, we're going to get a lot more people just by virtue of, so I think there's a lot of things that we can change, both internally with the companies and just how the tech ecosystem in America and in a lot of Europe really functions and thinks about what we do.
Well, Mala, you are wise beyond your years. I am completely honored that you've joined me for this discussion, and I look forward to watching your future posts and work. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. And thanks for doing what you do.
For this video, you can find us on techsavvywoman.tv and other videos like it. Thank you, Mala. Enjoy the day.
Thank you.